Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight to celebrate the National Coalition Against Censorship's Free Speech Defender Awards. 2021 has been, well, it occurred. Okay, I think we can safely say that. Let's all be honest. We thought 2020 was a doozy, as a matter of fact, and then 2021 happened, and we're all just, well, holding on by a thread, which is why we need NCAC in times of crisis. After crisis, after crisis, after crisis, it can feel easier to just want the people we disagree with to shut up. For almost 50 years, NCAC has been our voice of reason. They remind us not to let fear win because censorship at its core is about fear. Parents afraid their children will ask questions they don't want to answer. Museum boards afraid controversy will cost them money. Legislators afraid of changing tides, of loss of power. Censors fear change. They fear complexity and discomfort, but NCAC understands that complexity and discomfort are how we grow, how we progress. So when fear becomes censorship, NCAC intervenes to ensure that we can all create, read, learn, think, explore as we choose, to ensure that fear doesn't win. Now, I know that my being here may give you the impression that NCAC has the budget of, say, a billionaire trying to live out his childhood space dreams, or at least like the Tonys. But behind the scenes, NCAC is a scrappy group of dedicated advocates, and they rely on your support. Throughout the night, whenever you're inspired, please make a donation. The button is right there on your screen. If you're inspired twice, donate twice or thrice. Truly, you cannot overuse the donate button. Tonight, we're going to give out some awards. We're going to hear from some of NCAC's leaders, and we've got some comedians that you don't want to miss. And along the way, we're going to learn more about NCAC and why they do what they do. NCAC is a first responder to protect free expression, which is both a fundamental human right and a keystone of American democracy. When controversy occurs, they encourage and facilitate dialogue between divergent voices and perspectives, including those that have historically been silenced. This work has never been more vital. Since the start of the school year, dozens of books have been challenged in states all across the country. Entire reading lists have been banned in school districts. Librarians have been threatened with criminal prosecution. State legislatures and school boards are making it harder and harder for teachers to teach. An international art exhibition in Florida was canceled when the mayor demanded artists be excluded for, is this right? Not being anti-communist enough. This isn't similar to a culture war. We're in a culture war, and the collateral damage is nuance. No one has the right to tell you what to believe, what to read, or what to create. We need NCAC more than ever. Please visit ncac.org to learn more about their work. To tell you a little bit more about NCAC, let's welcome the board president and publisher of Simon & Schuster Children's Publishing Division, John Anderson. Hi, John.
Thanks, Randy. This is one of my favorite nights of the year. It's an honor to serve as NCAC's board president, and I feel so lucky to get to publicly celebrate this work. I want to thank my fellow board members and our benefit committee for their support on this event. I'd especially like to thank Megan Tingley, the executive vice president and publisher of Little Brown Books for Young Readers, for chairing our benefit committee and for her dedication to making tonight's event a success. Tremendous thanks to our title sponsors, Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random House, Hachette, and Humble Bundle, and to our partner sponsors, Abrams, Charles Koch Institute, and Macmillan. And of course, I have to acknowledge the hardworking NCAC staff. We're not the only ones celebrating free speech. This year's Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to two journalists expressly for their defense of freedom of expression. The Nobel Committee recognized that free expression is a precondition for democracy and called out the increasingly adverse conditions for global democracy and freedom of the press. Some may have been surprised by the choice, but at NCAC, we were heartened. It used to be easy to forget in America that even though the freedom to think and express ourselves as we choose is a fundamental human right, free speech is a right that people fight and die for. It used to be easy to forget because in America, free speech felt foundational. But lately, it's becoming a little too easy to imagine an America in which free speech is the privilege of a few, not the right of all. State legislatures are pushing for greater control over what histories and ideas can be taught in schools. Private companies, not bound by the First Amendment, control access to our public sphere at an unprecedented scale, wielding enormous power over who is permitted to speak. We need NCAC's credibility and experience to help guide us through this time, to help us restore our American commitment to dissent, to disagreement, to free expression. Judy Bloom will receive a Lifetime Achievement Award tonight. Judy has always said that the people trying to censor her books were afraid of what kids might learn, the questions they might ask, the conversations some adults might want to avoid. She's right. Censorship is born of fear. Fear of discomfort, fear of loss of power, fear of change. Let me tell you what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that students, denied the right to read books that challenge them, will grow into adults who haven't been exposed to lives unlike their own and haven't been allowed to learn how to engage with difficult ideas. I'm afraid that artists, prevented from disseminating their work publicly, will hold back, won't push boundaries and challenge us all to question what we think we know. I'm afraid that ideas will wither because their thinkers will be so afraid to be wrong, they will never discourse and debate and disagree their way to genius or insight or truth. And let me tell you what gives me hope, NCAC. And all of you here tonight supporting this fight, this daily fight in school districts and legislatures, in city councils and corporate boardrooms. This fight for a principle that we all, as humans, have the right to our thoughts and beliefs, the right to create and learn and grow. And the knowledge that the health of our democracy depends on our right to disagree with each other, to learn from each other, to challenge the status quo and criticize those in power. We're here because NCAC's work is more valuable than ever, because almost 45 years in, NCAC is still out there every day, calling out censorship and supporting authorities to do better, making sure that no act of censorship, large or small, is allowed to succeed in silence. Thank you, all of you, for being here tonight to support this vital work.
Thanks, John, and thank you for all you do for NCAC. Now, let's get to the awards. Every year, NCAC honors people who have shown a particular dedication to promoting and defending freedom of expression with Free Speech Defender Awards. To present this year's Author Award, we decided to give an unknown actress a shot. Hopefully, this will help launch her career. Please welcome Whoopi Goldberg.
Thanks, Randy. And thank you to the National Coalition Against Censorship for all your work and for giving me the opportunity to present this award to my friend Chris Colfer. Now, Chris is a New York Times best-selling author of 18 books, including the wildly successful Land of Stories series, published around the world in 35 countries. His bold, fearless writing is beloved by young readers everywhere, and his commitment to writing about inclusion and identity has inspired young people to see themselves as writers as well. No small feat. Chris's writing gives kids the opportunity to explore who they are and see anything as being possible. Most of us got to know and love Chris on Glee, where his unapologetic, award-winning portrayal of an openly gay teenager allowed queer youth to see themselves reflected on network television in a way that they had never been before. Chris knows the power of his stories, and he is unafraid to share them. He's a groundbreaker, but he's also a ground builder. His readers take photos of his books next to landmarks in countries where freedom of speech and free expression are challenged. Chris's readers speak emotionally about how his books have helped them survive their personal struggles and have inspired them to tell their own stories. Chris's writing is so powerful because of who he is and who he encourages his readers to be, themselves. And if I know Chris, as long as there's one kid out there who needs his stories, Chris will keep writing, keep creating, and keep building. So now it is my great pleasure and honor to present a Free Speech Defender Award to Chris Colfer. Congratulations, my dear friend. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Whoopi. This is very special for me because Whoopi was my childhood hero. And even though I've worked with her and I've known her for more than a decade, it's still very surreal to hear my name come out of her mouth. So thank you so much, Whoopi, for presenting me with this honor, and I hope to see you very soon. I want to start by thanking the National Coalition Against Censorship for this honor and the incredible work they do. It's because of people and organizations like them that people like me get to be writers in the first place, and that kids like me don't have to go through life feeling alone. So being recognized by the NCAC means the absolute world to me. When I was writing my first novel, The Land of Stories, The Wishing Spell, I was told by many people that I was wasting my time. They said the world wasn't ready to let their children read a book written by an openly gay man, and it was destined to be a flop. I assured them that writing wasn't a choice for me. I had stories I simply had to get out of me for my own sanity. But the cynicism that I faced, it gave me very, very low expectations about a possible writing career. Well, 10 years, 18 books, 30 languages, 35 territories, and millions of sales later, I am happy to report those skeptics were wrong. Yes, there have been successful and unsuccessful attempts to keep my books out of certain areas because of who and what I am. Yes, there have been slurs and political propaganda graffitied in my books because of the diversity and inclusion I write about. But thanks to the overwhelming support of my readers and their tireless campaign to get my books into classrooms, bookstores, and libraries all over the globe and into the hands of the kids who may need them the most, my readers have proven the world is ready for someone like me. This award is theirs as much as it is mine, and although I've written over a dozen books, I could never describe my gratitude in words. To all the young people watching this who may be facing skeptics and challenges of their own, please never let someone else's roadblocks slow you down. And I know I say this a lot, but always remember, the more the world discourages you, the more it needs you. Thank you all so much for this. I will treasure it forever.
If those inspirational tingles I'm feeling are any indication, we're off to a great start. One thing tonight's honorees all know is this: progress depends on the right to speak freely, to disagree and dissent. It also depends on the ability to learn and to access information. Our next honoree has dedicated decades to expanding knowledge. To present our next award, please welcome the chair of Howard University's Department of African Studies. Please forgive me if I mess up the name. I missed rehearsal this afternoon. Dr. Mbai Cham. Cham? In my neighborhood, we'd say Cham, but I don't think that's it. Dr. Mbai.
Greetings and many thanks to the National Coalition Against Censorship for inviting me here tonight to honor a friend, Miss Brenda Randolph. Her work stands out really in the field of African studies. It's quite difficult to really overstate the necessity of the work that Brenda has been engaged in. It's really quite foundational, very crucial at this time especially. As I said, Brenda is one who really embodies that passion, right? And that commitment to making sure that people have access. I can go on and on and on, but I'm not the only one celebrating Brenda today. And we have her colleague, Dr. Vanessa Oyuji.
Congratulations, Brenda, on receiving the NCAC Free Speech Defender for Activists Award. It is well earned for championing the creative and cultural diversity of the many countries that make up the continent of Africa. Platforms such as Africa Access and CABA contribute to provoking greater awareness of the varied perspectives and stories that African and diasporan writers and illustrators have to tell. So thank you, Brenda, for working so hard to amplify and celebrate these voices.
Greetings. My name is Nelda Latif. As a children's author and illustrator of stories inspired by African oral tradition, I can think of no greater honor or privilege than to be here to celebrate a woman I am proud to call my friend, Brenda Randolph, on receiving the National Coalition Against Censorship Award. Brenda is a hero to all of us authors and illustrators who aspire to do the vast continent of Africa justice through our uncensored words and art. Thank you, Brenda, for believing that children deserve to see themselves in the books they read, and for believing in the transformative power of culturally sensitive stories that open hearts and minds and inspire readers to be curious, resilient, and compassionate. Brenda, congratulations on receiving the National Coalition Against Censorship Award.
So congratulations, Brenda. It's a well-deserved award.
Thank you to the National Coalition Against Censorship for this award. Thank you to Dr. Evelyn Rich, Harriet McGuire, and the African American Institute for your support. Thank you to my African Studies mentors and colleagues at Howard University. And most of all, thank you to my family. I am grateful to NCAC for giving me the opportunity through this award to promote the authors and illustrators recognized by the Children's Africana Book Award and Read Africa projects. My nonprofit Africa Access, African Studies at Howard University, and the Outreach Council of the African Studies Association have worked together for over 30 years to promote books that tell more than a single story about Africa, as Nigerian author Chimamanda Adichie so eloquently put it. In 1970, I spent months in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, photographing the city, the shops, roundabouts, parks, restaurants, mosques, and churches, photographing the people, kids playing soccer, vendors selling tea, fishermen sailing dhows on a sparkling green-blue sea. My goal was to publish a book that countered the dire images of Africa so common in children's books in the US. A book that inspired pride rather than pity, that highlighted African agency and ingenuity. That book was never published. I could not convince a single US publisher that a book like this was needed. In her book, Censoring Reality, award-winning author Beverly Naidu describes the censorship she faced in South Africa when trying to publish books that revealed the reality of state-sponsored racism. My book project and Naidu's faced a common foe: gatekeepers, censors who suppressed authentic voices describing their African life experiences, their histories. Naidu circumvented her South African censors. Her 1985 book, Journey to Joburg, banned in South Africa, became a classic around the world. It was unbanned in 1991 when the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa and a world united broke the chains of the apartheid state. That same year, I read the book Galimoto by Catherine Stock to a class of second graders in Maryland. Galimoto is about a little boy in a town in Malawi who wants to make a wire toy car, like the big boys in town. After I read the story, a little girl, a recent immigrant from Liberia, pulled me aside and whispered in my ear, "Please read more books like Galimoto to my class. These children don't know anything about Africa. They say horrible things to me." Galimoto shows what Africa is really like. 19 years after my experiences with US publishers, I finally had a book about urban Africa to share with children. US publishing gatekeepers were opening the gates to African realities, but just a bit. A recent article in Publishers Weekly pointed to a systemic problem in the publishing industry. a workforce that a publisher's weekly editor described as overwhelmingly white at every level. True lasting change will only happen when the industry decides to diversify its staff and stop assuming that authors of color are less desirable and marketable. But I do see progress in the industry. I am especially excited by the increasing number of books from writers who are children of African immigrants. Born in the US, but attuned to their immigrant parents' cultures, their books bring fresh depictions of Africa that speak to American youth, many of whom are seeking characters who look like them. Nnedi Okorafor, Tome Adeyemi, Elizabeth Zunan, and Tochi Onyebuchi have published several books, and there are exciting new writers on the horizon, like Safia El-Hilo. I truly appreciate this award, and virtually I share it with scores of African studies scholars who write reviews of children's Africana and work year after year on CABA selection committees. To read our reviews and access Read Africa books, go to africaaccessreview.org and visit cababooks.org on Howard University's Center for African Studies page to see the list of CABA winners 1992 to the present. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. From all of us, thank you. Our next award honors some of the frontline workers in the fight to protect free expression, librarians. And there's no one better to present this next award than the executive director of one of NCAC's most valued partners, the American Library Association. Please welcome Tracy Hall.
Thank you to NCAC for having me here tonight to tell you a bit about an extraordinary librarian, Ria Brown Lawson, one of our nation's finest practitioners and a leader absolutely revered in the profession. As executive director of the Houston Public Library, Ria Brown Lawson knows how central the freedom to read is to the ideals of equity, equality, and access. And she knows how readily the right to read for adults and for young people can be challenged by calls for censorship. But Ria believes that libraries are a symbol of democracy, and she has spent her career fighting to ensure that they are generative and transformative spaces where everyone is welcome. Ria took a boarded up school, the Gregory School, the first school for Black children in Houston, and transformed it into the African American Library. After Hurricane Harvey decimated so many lives in Houston, Ria turned library branches into safe havens and ensured that thousands of residents were able to use library computers to file insurance claims. Ria embodies the best of what libraries offer, and she takes seriously her responsibility to uphold one of the most important bastions of free expression in our democracy, the library.
It gives me great pleasure to say congratulations to Dr. Lawson. Both this and many other recognitions are well-deserved for her outstanding contributions to our field. Ria is a force, and she knows who she is, what she wants, and more importantly, what she stands for. Ria has served as a mentor for many up-and-coming professionals in our field, and she reminds us of our collective power to change the world by helping to create a literate and civically engaged mind. It is within our reach to raise awareness with the power of the written word, and she has fought so fiercely for that right and for that freedom. I can think of no one else better to receive the National Coalition Against Censorship Judith Krug Outstanding Librarian Award other than Dr. Lawson. Congratulations, my friend.
As we celebrate free speech and those that are defenders of that right, it is more than befitting that Dr. Ria Brown Lawson is being honored this evening with the Judith Krug Outstanding Librarian Award. The National Coalition Against Censorship could not have selected a more deserving librarian for this award. I'm Leisha Green, and as chair of the Houston Public Library Foundation, I have had the opportunity to work alongside Dr. Lawson over the past 7 years. I can attest that she is passionate about the work that she does, and that as she is on the front line vigorously defending one's right to exercise free expression. In August of 2017, one of our neighborhood libraries began offering Drag Queen Storytime because of requests from the neighborhood. Drag Queen Storytime was a volunteer-led and offered at no cost to the library. Dr. Lawson has always believed in providing community space for critical conversations and for activities and events that celebrate the diversity of our great city, and the Drag Queen Storytime was no different. Through protests, lawsuits, armed agitators, threatening messages, national attention, and the news media, not once did Dr. Lawson ever waver. She prevailed and remained committed to the cause and provide the leadership for her team, the foundation, and the city through this very challenging time. There is no doubt that Dr. Lawson is resilient and makes all of us who serve as volunteers to support the library, Houston, proud. And with Dr. Lawson at the helm of our library system, we are indeed Houston strong. Congratulations, Dr. Lawson, on this amazing award.
Because of her dedication, vision, and sheer brilliance, it is my pleasure to introduce you to the winner of the very first Judith Krug Outstanding Librarian Award, Ria Brown Lawson.
Thank you, Sky, Alicia, and Tracy. I love you ladies and I appreciate each of you. I'm grateful for you taking the time out of your extremely busy schedules to join me for this special occasion and to offer your congratulations. I want to thank everyone at the National Coalition Against Censorship for selecting me to receive the inaugural Judith Krug Award. I am truly honored to receive this award because Judith was such a tireless force and strong advocate for intellectual freedom, which is the right for everyone to freely create, read, speak, disseminate, and seek information, and to tell their own stories. Being able to tell or write your own story in your own way is critical and very powerful because it allows you to be free. If we don't protect the right for everyone to tell their own stories, others will tell our stories for us. When others tell our stories, they may take out the parts they don't like about our stories, or suppress parts that they don't agree with, or erase concepts they don't understand, or even seek to ban your story with the hope that your truth can just be erased or hidden from plain view. Telling one's story equates to telling one's truth. It is a release. Maya Angelou, and I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you." As a librarian, freedom of expression is at the core of my profession, and that is why we made space at the Houston Public Library for Drag Queen Story Hour. We did so in spite of the barrage of protests, ugly and continuous protests. I am proud of our mayor, our foundation, community members, my staff, and all who stood with us to support this freedom of expression. Texas has some of the most aggressive efforts to control the teaching of American history content. Challenges are rapid on publications like the 1619 Project and books focused on so-called critical race theory. In addition, books focused on anti-racism and social justice are also being challenged in public libraries. Judith was forward-thinking and tenacious as she blazed the path for us and urged us to stay vigilant and keep up the fight for free speech. I am so thrilled to receive this honor in her name. Congratulations to all the award recipients. I am proud to stand with you, and thanks again to NCAC.
You know, for a right enshrined in the Constitution, it's amazing how hard all of these honorees have to work to defend free expression. I'm just saying. I'm starting to see why NCAC has been so busy for almost 50 years. 50 years. It turns out that every generation struggles with free speech. Luckily, NCAC is going to keep defending your rights and protecting all our freedom to learn, create, disagree, and belt our protest songs to the rafters. But remember that they need your help. It's right there, that fun, darling little donate button. Go ahead and give it a click. While you're logging those generous donations for which NCAC is endlessly grateful, let's hear a little more about NCAC's, I'm not reading this at all, it's just coming to me. It's all improv. Let's hear, shall we, a little more about NCAC's work. Let me introduce you to NCAC Executive Director, Chris Finan. Finan? Finan! I just read the pronunciation key. Chris, honey, take it away.
Thanks, Randy. And thank you to all our presenters tonight. We have an amazing group of honorees this year. The work and dedication on display here is astonishing. Our esteemed board chair, John Anderson, has already thanked our sponsors and supporters. Now I want to express my deep appreciation for his many years of leadership on the board. After 7 years of service, he will finally be able to use his chair to get some rest. Our event chair, Megan Tingley from Little Brown Books for Young Readers, also has our deepest gratitude. Megan went all out to make this year's benefit a success. Finally, I want to thank all of you who are joining us tonight, whether you are a longtime friend of NCAC, someone new to our work, or a friend of one of our incredible honorees. I want to talk a little about how I got involved in free speech advocacy. As a cub reporter, I was disturbed as I observed people in power trying to manipulate the stories that the public got to read. And then as a historian, I learned how protest and dissent changed the course of history as underrepresented groups fought for their right to be heard. Abolitionists, suffragists, labor organizers, and civil rights leaders. Their victories expanded the right to free speech and began to realize the full promise of equality. Today, we take for granted that government cannot tell us what to say, but we face a new threat. In our deeply polarized country, self-censorship is growing. The fact that so many Americans are afraid of expressing their ideas is deeply worrying. Democracy depends on debate. As Justice Holmes observed, democracy is an experiment. We have to make decisions based on imperfect knowledge. The only way to find out truth is to engage with those who hold a different view, and every speaker must have an opportunity to be heard. In our experience at NCAC, when an emotionally charged issue arises in a community, whether it is the burning of the flag or an incident of hate speech, many people's first instinct is to punish the speaker. Censorship is usually driven by fear. Right now, across the country, many Americans are afraid of what children might be reading in school and are fighting hard to remove books from classrooms and library shelves. I remember when the books that parents feared most were written by tonight's Lifetime Achievement Award winner, Judy Bloom. They talked honestly about adolescence, and when they were challenged, she fought for them. She became a champion for reading, for authors, and for students to have the freedom to learn, create, and explore. We have been so lucky to have Judy on the NCAC board for nearly 20 years. The same arguments used against Judy's books in the 1980s are still being made in school and library board meetings today in an effort to keep students from reading books that tell painful stories. Challenges we are facing today demand the kind of approach we have taken at NCAC for almost 50 years, combining advocacy on national issues with intervention in local censorship disputes. The people who are defending free speech, teachers, curators, artists, writers, students, librarians, depend on NCAC support to keep up the fight every single day. I hope you will continue to support NCAC by visiting our website and possibly making a donation at ncac.org/donate. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to learn more about our work. Thanks.
Holy jumping f***ing shitballs.
Censorship began when people did. A mere 1600 years later, when British anti-Catholic mocking became extremely vicious, the Archbishop of Canterbury banned all satire in England. In the 19th century, King Louis Philippe of France was so sensitive about his weight that he saw this drawing and threw the cartoonist in prison. In 1928, 56 cast members of a Mae West play were arrested for indecency. Still, some clever filmmakers were able to slip things in.
All the lying, pussyfooting.
Don't say you don't like the pussyfooting. I love it.
I don't even know what that means, but it's clearly dirty. And then came Lenny, who got into trouble with many of his words, including this one.
I'm not going to repeat the word because I want to finish the gig here tonight. They said it was vernacular for a favorite homosexual practice, a 10-letter word. It starts with a C. Well, you know what the word is. Now, it's weird how they manifested that word as homosexual, because I don't. That relates to any contemporary chick I know, or would know, or would love, or would marry, you know.
Arrested repeatedly, Bruce was found guilty of obscenity in 1964 and died bankrupt. In 2003, the governor of New York granted him a full pardon. Yippee! And then came George.
Some of those words aren't always dirty. I found that out trying to make a list, trying to get a little journeyman list going here for myself. Want to know the ones I can never say. All I could think of was shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits, man. 7.
The FCC ruled Carlin's routine patently offensive, and the Supreme Court agreed. Richard Pryor battled censors his whole career, especially when he got a primetime TV series.
People say, well, how can you have a show? You've got to compromise. You've got to give up everything. Well, look at me. I'm standing here naked. I've given up absolutely nothing.
Lenny, Richard, and George paved the way for other boundary-breaking stand-ups. While on TV, South Park was forced to censor an episode with the Prophet Muhammad dressed in a bear costume. To which The Simpsons responded, meanwhile, censorship marches on all around the world. In Myanmar, comic Par Parley said people shouldn't steal because the government doesn't like the competition. He got 7 years hard labor. In Egypt, prosecutors ordered the arrest of Bassem Youssef, whose TV show was watched by half the country, for mocking a ceremonial hat worn by the president. In Kazakhstan, an activist held up a blank sign to see if he'd be arrested, and he was. In America, free speech is also under attack from the left. In the end, though,
free speech is extremely important because me being a Jew, I don't want to have to pay for speech.
My wife and children seem to think I'm a pretty funny guy, but I can't hold a candle to the 3 exceptionally funny people you are about to meet. Maz Jobrani, Judy Gold, and Alonzo Bodden are professional comedians who are joining us to talk about comedy and free expression, the state of comedy today, and what's at stake when comedy is stifled. We are very glad to have with us right now Maz Jobrani, a comedian and actor who has probably appeared on one of your favorite TV shows. He hosts the podcast Back to School with Maz Jobrani and wrote a best-selling book called I'm Not a Terrorist, but I played one on TV. Thanks for being here, Max.
Thanks for having me, Chris. By the way, it's Maz, like Lamaz or Mazatlan or Mazda. I just told you, but it's okay. You are funny. Don't worry about it. Move on. Mazda, Maserati. Go on.
Maz, sorry. We're off to a flying start.
You're making me laugh already, man. You are the funniest guy in the room.
Okay. I know this is a big question, but why does comedy matter?
Laughter is good. I think laughter, we can agree, is good. I like to laugh. People like to laugh. In India, they had, I don't know if they still do, but they used to have laughing clubs where they would go out in the park and just go, ha, 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 ha. And it was like laughter yoga. So laughter is good. Now, to get to laughter, you have two choices. You can either tell a joke or tickle the person. And since probably just going around tickling random people is not a good thing, therefore, comedy is the second best thing after tickling, and that's why it matters.
Okay, great answer. What makes comedy scary?
I think comedy a lot of times can have some truth to it, and if people are afraid of that truth, they try to censor it. That's why a lot of times we see sometimes the censorship happens when you are making fun of someone in power. So, for example, when I had done tours in the Middle East starting in 2007, a lot of times when we went to some of the countries that we performed at, they would tell us, whatever you do, don't make fun of the leader. They didn't want us to make fun of the leader because, that's, if there's any truth to the thing you make fun of, then that could in some way weaken the leader.
So you've had experience with censorship, personally silenced.
Yeah, and I would say, and I would, it hasn't been so extreme where I was, pulled out of a venue and, locked up. It was more that the promoters would say, here's, for example, when I first went to the Middle East, they said, you can talk about anything you want, but no sex, no religion, no politics. And we were like, oh, okay, then hello and good night, or salam alaikum and alaikum salam. Vice versa, in America, when I had my first TV set, it was on Comedy Central, a show called Premium Blend, and they had us submit our act in writing to the standards and practice folks. And they came back and they said, your act is fine, except you can't mention these brands. And they went down a list of brands that happened to be mentioned in my act. And I said, why? They said, well, they might be sponsors. So I quickly realized in the Middle East, God is God, and in the West, Tide is God.
What is the danger of putting particular topics off limits for comedians aside from Tide?
So, a lot of times you hear people saying cancel culture, cancel culture, cancel culture. Well, that's where I think the right started using this terminology to describe people on the left that were saying these certain topics are off limits. I wouldn't say that they're off limits. I would say we need to revisit and see what we're saying, how we're saying. Are we being lazy? Are we treating, let's say, certain communities the way we were 30 years ago and not looking at those communities in a more progressive, modern way? And truly, I personally, if any cancellation, I've had more cancellation from the right. And again, I'll go back to Trump. I honestly, how many shows did I do throughout the Trump administration where I would bring up his name and the people in the audience weren't even listening to the context? As soon as they heard his name, they would yell back as like, you can't talk about him. And they wanted to cancel my opinion on Trump. And that is dangerous. I mean, we live in a society where we're supposed to be able to make fun of those in power. That's what makes us a democracy. The whole point of this country is that I can make fun of the president. I should be able to make fun of the president. And quickly, these people that were defending the president would then point at things like, yeah, you should go back to Iran. You think you make fun of the president in Iran? And I go, no, I can't. That's why I don't want to go back to Iran. I want to be here. So that is the danger, I think, when we start limiting comedians and other thinkers in society, writers, anybody, from talking about those in power. I think that really is a dangerous place to get to.
Are you hopeful about the future of comedy?
we find ways to move forward, and I think we will continue to do that. I think that's the comedian's job. I heard D.L. Hughley say one time, he said that comedy is like giving people their medicine, but in orange juice so they don't taste it.
All right. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Take care.
Judy Gold is the author of Yes, I Can Say That. When they come for the comedians, we're all in trouble. As well as an Emmy-winning comedian and writer and host of a podcast called Kill Me Now. Hi, Judy.
Hey, how are you?
Welcome to the NCAC benefit.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I love all the work you do.
Oh, thank you. Judy, your book addresses contemporary comedy censorship. We're not talking about the People versus Lenny Bruce anymore. The threat now is social prison, career prison. But self-censorship can be just as effective at silencing comics as government censorship. Can you describe the threats facing comics today?
Well, A, great question. B, it's not that much different than, Lenny Bruce. It really isn't. If it's the same idea. Lenny was arrested for cursing on stage, for using foul language. But what they really wanted him for was the substance of his material. It essentially was an excuse. And he was talking about, racism and segregation and the Vietnam War and all the stuff the government really truths about what was going on. And the government did not like it. Here we are now. We're at this point where comedians are censoring themselves because they're afraid. And satire is really the last bastion of free speech because it's the most palatable way to discuss a subversive topic. And we all talk about, laughter being the best medicine, which it is. And comedy is definitely a unifier. You sit in a club next to someone who you might hate everything about them on paper, and yet you're laughing at the same joke. It brings people together. But as we know, it's also a weapon. And it speaking truth to power is for some reason, a scary place for the people who are doing it. And I think we have a really weird relationship with the truth in this country now.
So what is being lost? I mean, what is the consequence for, such widespread self-censorship?
It's definitely something that comics are talking about a lot. And like really subversive, like really edgy comics. That's what really got me scared, was edgy comics saying, Judy, do you think I'm going to get in trouble for this? And I'm like, oh my God, have we forgotten why we're here? We're here to entertain.
So what do you say to what advice do you give to a young comic who may be afraid?
That's so great to ask that, because I wasn't afraid. I had no fear. I still have no fear because I've been doing this so long. There's nothing you can say to me that I haven't heard. And, I'm not, I've been through it all. But coming up right now, a young comic, I think that it's just important to tell the truth. Humor comes from the truth. I mean, a great comedian allows you to see the world through their eyes. It's a powerful thing to make an audience laugh. So I would tell these young comics, just realize that, you're up there and you have the power, and use it wisely. But most importantly, make it funny. Make it funny.
Well, thank you, Judy. We are very appreciative. Thanks.
Well, I'm appreciative of what you do, and please keep doing what you do, because I feel like this is the issue of our times, and it's really, really important.
Well, thanks. We'll keep at it. Alonzo Bodden is a regular panel member of NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. and the hosts the podcast Who's Paying Attention. It's great to meet you, Alonzo.
Hey, Chris. Good to meet you too, my friend.
Alonzo, what's the mood these days when it comes to provocative comedy?
Well, there is that little cancel culture, and I say little because that is the smaller voice, the people who get upset. Well, I shouldn't say the smaller voice, the smaller group. These people who get upset and they're yelling and complaining about it. When you're in the club and you're doing material, people still love it. And, you know, comics are always going to push buttons. That's part of our job.
So you don't worry about offending people?
Chris, I wish I could get canceled. I need the press. If there's any group I could offend that you think would step up the game, I'll be happy to say something about them. You know, it's like what's going on right now with Dave Chappelle and his special, The Closer. And to anyone watching this who hasn't seen it, I got to give you a spoiler alert. You might want to turn your head for a minute. But a lot of people were yelling and getting all upset about what he said about, you know, gay people or trans people. But if you watch it to the end, you would understand his point of view, what he's saying. And it's not insulting at all. And it's his point of view. He's not telling you have to think the way I do. It's not the same as if a politician comes out with some racist or homophobic thing. Now you're dealing with someone who makes law and makes policy. You're talking about a comedian commenting on society, and it's what we do. We do it all the time.
So why, you know, as a general question, why do you think comedy is important? What does it contribute to society?
We tell the truth. We are the last ones to tell the truth. We also make the truth more palatable, and we provide escape. You know, we're coming off a year of a pandemic, right? We're coming off a year of people being on edge, people being locked down. If you watch the news every day, it's like, how are you still alive? Yeah, something's going to kill you in the news every day. We're the ones who make you laugh at it, or we might take you away from it. We might do joke like, listen, when I'm on stage, I will joke about anti-vaxxers and racism, but I also joke about my dog. I joke about the trials and tribulations of having a spoiled Great Dane. And that might be your escape for a minute. So that's what we comics do. We make fun of the truth, and we take you away from the truth. We make a horrible palatable, and you know, and we have fun doing it. By the way, we ourselves are generally miserable people. We're also much more miserable than you, yet we have figured out how to market it.
What's your feeling about the future of comedy? Is it in peril?
No. Listen, comedy, it's like jazz, okay? I think jazz has been dying since, like, I don't know, 1955, 1960. You know, it's the end of jazz, and yet there's still jazz artists creating brilliant music. Comedy's not going anywhere because, as I said, we're a voice, and people like the voice. You know, the quietest group in our society is always the big group, the group in the middle, the group that goes to a comedy show and laughs their ass off and then goes home, and they don't suddenly hate a group of people and they don't want to protest the next day. They understand, I went to a comedy show and he or she had some funny stuff to say about what's going on, and I had a good night. Again, you have that small percentage that is like, you know, I'm offended by everything. And then you have the other end, you have that small percentage that say, yeah, I'm going to say the most hateful things I can and call it comedy, right? I mean, how many times did these right-wing politicians get caught saying something horrible and then they're like, oh, I was just kidding. Like, no, you weren't. And you're not a comic. Listen, Ted Cruz is the most unfunny person in the world. Now, someone to make fun of, hilarious. Funny himself, not a bit.
Well, I'm glad to hear the positive report. Thanks, Alonzo, Judy, and Maz. It's been fascinating to get all of your perspectives. You happen to be extremely thoughtful in addition to being so funny. Alonzo and Maz are currently touring, and you can learn more about dates and tickets on their websites. Judy's book is published by HarperCollins and is available wherever you buy your books. Thanks to them all.
Hear, hear, long live comedy. To present our next award to a true comedy legend, we have another comedy legend. This time it's Stephen Skrovin, who has written and produced some of your favorite shows. Hi, Stephen.
Thank you, Randy. I'm a big fan. Hey, and what about that roundtable? And it's one thing to say what's on your mind. Anybody can do that. It's an entirely different thing to actually make people laugh when you say it. That elevates it. That's their superpower. Very cool to see them all together. My first comedy writing job was on Seinfeld. And by the time I arrived, Larry Charles had already won an Emmy for his work on that show. He looked intimidating. He had long hair, he had a long beard, and he always wore this dark sweatsuit pajama ensemble. He looked like Rasputin, but he turned out to be quite the opposite. Incredibly generous with his time and his advice, approachable, accessible. He was a real mentor, and I learned so much from him. And that's why I'm pleased to present the Free Speech Defender Award for Artists to my friend, Larry Charles. As a writer, director, and producer, Larry has brought us some of the most influential comedy of the past few decades. Seinfeld, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Borat. The list is long enough to actually break IMDb. Larry, of course, is also really funny. He's got the superpower. But what makes him stand out is he's not afraid to offend you, and he's not afraid to be offended. S.J. Perlman once said, "It is the office of comedy to offend." Well, if that's the case, Larry Charles has the most offensive office. And I also mean that quite literally. Have you ever seen his office? It's a fucking mess. In my own career, I've come to realize that a person can't laugh if they're confused or bewildered. To get a laugh, you need to lead the audience to a moment of clarity. And each of those moments is a crystallization of a truth. It could be a literal truth, it could be an emotional truth, but that's why comedy can be so powerful. It can't help but tell the truth. And that's also why it can be so dangerous to some. With his Netflix series, The Dangerous World of Comedy, Larry Charles shows us that nothing, not danger, not authoritarianism, certainly not fear, can stifle the power of comedy. Let's take a look.
It's a dangerous world, filled with hate and violence and war, and amazingly enough, comedy.
When you are not funny, you are what in English?
You are not funny. Can you make a living as a comic in Iraq? Helping people forget they live in a war zone. How do you break into comedy in Somalia?
Look, now, Google it. Please, Google it.
It takes brave people to make dangerous comedy.
It's a therapy. The little laughter takes away the stress.
Risking their lives just to make people laugh.
You said that, I didn't say that.
Comedians and actors and TV and filmmakers who make comedy in places where it doesn't belong.
Get people to laugh just a little about that which might be the most sacred, and we might get them to open up a little bit.
You discovered your comic sensibility as a tool for survival. You talk to a Western equivalent. It's like, oh, I did a little show for my grandparents, or I was in a talent show at school.
Spoiled.
Right.
We live our lives. We like doing our nails, too.
I'm making a statement.
I will do a genocide joke, but it will be well-crafted.
Veterans have a sixth sense humor. That's how we deal with the job we gotta do.
I don't know, girls know this, but once you go cooked, you're hooked.
See what I mean? And now it's my honor to present this year's Free Speech Defender Award for Artists to a true innovator, a true believer in the power of comedy, and a true friend, Larry Charles.
Thank you, Steve. Steve is a comedian and writer and an old friend of mine, but he's been so much more. He's made a commitment to social justice, which isn't just a few jokes in a TV show, but has become his life. I deeply admire and respect him, and this means so much more coming from him, so thank you. I also, of course, want to thank the NCAC for awarding me this Free Speech Defender Award. I haven't been interested in awards for a long, long time, but being recognized by this organization for what is really important to me, well, that means a lot. Now, perhaps the greatest misconception about free speech is that it's free. Sure, people shoot their mouths off and pop off about all sorts of inane, ignorant things in this society and defend it by saying free speech. But truly free speech, the kind that produces controversy, the kind that produces change, the kind that makes people think and rethink, comes with a steep price. We live in a country with the least censorship of any place I've ever traveled to or visited. Because of that, we've gotten lazy. We squander free speech. We waste it. We take it for granted. Under the guise of free speech, disinformation and misinformation are given credibility. Free speech is meant to protect the truth that sets us free. But in our country, it's just as often used to protect lies that destroy us. To truly understand free speech, we need to look beyond our own borders. I've traveled to many countries where free speech is not only not free, but the price is often imprisonment, torture, and death. In these countries, people have come to realize how precious free speech is and how important it is to fight for it. Free speech isn't a birthright. Free speech, truly free speech, can only be measured by how much you're willing to sacrifice for it. Although our history is rife with people who have been imprisoned and murdered for what they've said, particularly when they've spoken truth to power, there is a more modern and, dare I say, more insidious form of censorship, a more devastating form of suppression of words that challenge the status quo. Propaganda, marginalization, dismissal, ridicule, and mockery until the person speaking the truth is relegated to the fringes of society where their voice is no longer taken seriously. This form of censorship, perpetuated by a mass media that seems to be merely an arm of the government with no room for alternate voices, might be the greatest danger to free speech. When's the last time you saw Ralph Nader or Noam Chomsky or Chris Hedges or Angela Davis on a national news show? When's the last time you heard a Native American or a prisoner or even a member of the working class on a news show? When was the last time you really heard somebody challenge and question the status quo in the mainstream media? It becomes more and more rare. No, we trot out the same talking heads with the same talking points and bury all other points of view. I remember when the arch-conservative, virulently right-wing William Buckley had a TV show called Firing Line, but he would regularly have on as guests black militants like Huey Newton or Eldridge Cleaver, or members of the radical left like Saul Alinsky or David Dellinger, or Warren Report skeptic Mark Lane, or counterculture heroes Timothy Leary or Allen Ginsberg. And there would be dialogue, not agendas. Where would you ever see these people on TV today? When I post something on social media, often the response is, "What's your source?" And I'll cite news sources like Alternet or The Intercept that most people have never even heard of. People don't realize how conditioned they've become to the party line of Fox News and CNN. So the challenge is to let people know that there is a truth beyond the misleading headlines and the scripted positions and the cliches. As a society, we need to stop being afraid of the truth about ourselves, the truth about our treatment of Native Americans, of colonialism, of slavery and war, and poverty and racism and power, and how it permeates the national psyche even as we speak. So I thank you for fighting that fight. People around the world look to us still to be that beacon of truth. Let's not let them down. The ability to speak freely is the foundation for any hope of change that might follow. So when we ask ourselves, what is the price of free speech? It's a rhetorical question. We already know the answer. It's priceless. Thank you.
Whew. How we all doing? Everyone good? You feel good? Do you need a little refresher? Maybe a cocktail or sandwich or something? Anyway, if you're feeling fired up and like you're ready to tell everyone you know about NCAC, I certainly am, how crucial protecting free expression is for democracy and art and education and comedy and making change. If you're feeling fired up in those ways, then you know what to do. Donate. And if you need one more push, we have one more award to give out. Let's welcome back NCAC's board president, John Anderson, to tell you about a trailblazing free speech defender, Judy Bloom.
This Lifetime Achievement Award acknowledges the decades that Judy Bloom has dedicated to advocating for young readers. Judy Bloom has published more than 29 novels, sold over 90 million copies, and been translated into 32 languages. But her true contributions to young adult literature are impossible to quantify. She was one of the very first authors to write frankly about the most personal and terrifying parts of adolescence. She has received the American Library Association's Margaret A. Edwards Award for Young Adult Literature. She's a Library of Congress Living Legend and received the National Book Foundation Medal for her distinguished contribution to American letters. Her novels allowed young readers to feel safe while grappling with puberty, family conflict, bullying, body image, and sexuality. Because of her honesty and commitment to young readers, Judy has been one of the most banned and challenged authors of the past century. When Judy's books came under attack in the 1980s, she jumped into the fight to defend not just her books, but to defend all young people's right to read. She's helped countless other authors, teachers, librarians, and booksellers facing censorship. And she's been an NCAC supporter and board member for many years. In honor of her commitment and lasting impact, this award will henceforth be named the Judy Bloom Lifetime Achievement Award. Here's a message from another big fan of Judy's, former librarian and decorated free expression advocate, Pat Scales.
Hey Judy, it's your friend, Pat Scales, coming to you from M. Judson Bookstore in downtown Greenville, South Carolina. And I'm here to say congratulations on winning the Lifetime Achievement Award from NCAC. And also to thank you, Judy, for providing kids with the books they need, the books they crave, and books that open an opportunity for them to have a conversation with the adults in their lives. But most of all, thank you for defending and promoting their right to read. And they thank you. Congratulations and love you.
Without further ado, it's a true honor to give the first Judy Bloom Lifetime Achievement Award to the legend herself, Judy Bloom. Congratulations, Judy, and thank you from all of us.
Thank you so much, John and Pat. Pat, we go back so far. I'll never forget our Today Show host asking of your fabulous program for parents, a program that kept parents in touch with the books that their kids were reading. Yes, he said, but will it play in Peoria? A line that cracked us up then, and a line that George and I use all the time in our lives now, all these years later, and it never fails to crack us up. John, we've been working together for such a long time, and I can't thank you enough for your support over all these years. You know, I didn't know enough when I started to write to know that my books could be considered controversial, and I'm so glad that I didn't. I wanted to write honestly for kids because that's what I'd wanted to read when I was young. Honest books about real kids and real families. Of course, not everyone thinks being honest with kids is the way to go. It sometimes frightens adults, and that fear is contagious. So some individuals and groups tried to ban my books thinking if they don't read about it, they won't know about it. And if they don't know about it, it will never happen to them. And then I'll never have to answer any of their questions. Well, we all know that's not how it works. When the censors came for me, it happened quickly, and I wasn't prepared. Once I found NCAC and Leanne Katz, our first executive director, and then the wonderful Joan Burton, They help me find my voice as an advocate for kids' right to read. As authors, it can feel lonely when your book, a book you poured your heart into, gets attacked. Not by the readers of that book, but by the adults in their lives. When people say your books are bad for kids, it's important to find others to fight in your corner. So thank you to NCAC for always being in my corner, for helping me defend not only my books, but so many others. And most of all, for this incredible honor. Thank you.
And please let me also add my thanks for everything you've written, Judy. My goodness, what an amazing group of honorees. Thank you to the NCAC for letting me be your host tonight. It was a pleasure and an honor, and for all the work you do. Thank you all for joining us. And while you log those final donations, let's welcome tonight's hardworking event chair, Executive Vice President and publisher of Little Brown Books for Young Readers, Megan Tingley.
Thank you, Randy, for being such an amazing host tonight. And thank you all for joining us. It's been a pleasure to serve as the chair for this year's event and get to know NCAC's staff and supporters. I hope you all enjoyed our program and that you'll be inspired to go learn more about the current cases NCAC is working on and all the resources available at ncac.org. And of course, please make a donation to help keep books in classrooms and art on walls and all of us free to think, create, and express ourselves. Good night.